Today is all about using transparent papers in collage. I'm going to take some of the translucent papers I made last week and show you one of my favorite ways to use them in grid collage. Join me while I assemble layer after layer to create a fun and personal story through transparency. I'm Jackie Bernardi, and welcome to my studio. The number one question that I get asked almost every single week is, what do I do with all my papers? And today I'm showing you one of the ways in which I use the papers, and that is in grid collage. Now, grid collage is just a simple mechanism for creating multiple mini collages in my sketchbook. Now, what you see there are some boxes that I outlined using my grid collage template, which I have a copy for you. There's a link in the description. If you click on that, you can sign up and I will send you the grid template so you can use this in your sketchbook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 6 mini collages today inside my sketchbook. I'm starting with this handwritten piece of paper that has my grandmother's handwriting on it. Now, this is a photocopy of her handwriting, and it's from one of the cookbooks that she hand wrote out with all of her recipes. I just love that. My grandmother passed in, gosh, 1979. So it's been a long time since she's been with us. But I love that I have her recipes and her handwriting because it makes me very nostalgic. So I'm using her handwriting as the base for this first collage. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to obliterate her handwriting. But the collage itself is not about the piece of paper, the recipe that she was writing. It's about her handwriting. So I'm going to build up layers for this collage, but I'm going to be using translucent and transparent papers. I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. So I'm just going to, this piece of paper that I have in my left hand right now is a piece of paper that is the wet strength tissue paper. Now, what I know about wet strength tissue paper is that it will not go transparent, but it will go translucent. So as you can see, I just put it over her handwriting. You can still see her handwriting through it, but it's been modified, it's been toned down. Whereas this piece of paper here with this, teal colored grid on it, uh, this piece of paper is made of medical exam paper, and what I know about medical exam paper is that when you get it wet and you sandwich it between gloss medium, the wet paper, and then more gloss medium on top, when it dries, it will dry completely transparent. Now, the medical exam paper that I use is listed in the description below, but just so you know, it is the crepe style medical exam paper, not the smooth. The smooth will go translucent, similar to the wet strength tissue paper, but it won't go transparent. The crepe style goes completely transparent, and in a little bit, once this dries a little, I'll do a closer up view of that so you can see how absolutely transparent that paper went. As I started to mention earlier, I love the sense of history that you can develop by interspersing transparent and translucent papers with opaque papers. And this little piece of paper that you're seeing on the left-hand side there, that was created when I made that gigantic painted paper session a couple of weeks ago with all the metallics and all that. I loved that flowing movement. I'll link to the video for that. But I wanted to include some opaque pieces as touch points for the rest of the collage within that grid box. You can see I'm starting in with the next grid. I am not done with that first grid. And part of my process in working with grid collage in my sketchbook, I love these pieces. Part of my process is that I want all the squares in any one grid to have commonalities, but I very much want them to be their own independent pieces. So I will always try to carry over some elements from one grid box to the next, but I don't want to be forced to use the exact same papers in each grid, but I want there to be a consistency or a cohesiveness between all the squares. So what that means is my process is I start jumping from square to square. So this teal paper is showing up in that first box, not as that piece of paper itself, but in that transparent grid type paper that I put down, right? So we have the teal there. Now I have a solid teal going in the second box. And I don't know if teal will carry through in each of all 6 grids, but it is for now. I also wanted to add some of my own personal marks. So I have my grandmother's handwriting in that first grid. I don't have it in the second grid yet, but I wanted to put my own personal handwritten marks there. So I used some of that Lyra graphite pencil and I put down those squiggly lines there. And it's a nod to my grandmother's handwriting, even though it's not handwriting at all. It's just a hand created mark element. And that's just to carry through. That's all. So the medium I have been using primarily is matte medium. Matte medium is what I normally use when I am creating collage, but I use gloss medium when I want to make a paper go transparent. But I don't particularly like a glossy look in my certainly in my sketchbook, but I don't love the glossy look. Uh, it just gets me to the point of transparency. Once it's completely dried, I usually go over it with matte medium. The paper itself will stay transparent, but I will get that nice matte finish that I like so much. So most of what you're seeing me use today is the matte medium. However, when I'm working on a piece of paper like this one here, that will go transparent if I do the right things to it. Um, You'll see I'm going to use the gloss medium because the gloss medium is what makes it go transparent. So again, the formula that I'm using here is spray the paper with water, put gloss medium down on the paper itself, the grid paper, and then put gloss medium on the paper that I want to go transparent. That's what I'm doing here. I just put it on that catalyst wedge just to ran out of space on the table to work. And put it down here, and then I'm going to go over the top of it to smooth it down with more gloss medium. When that dries, it will be completely transparent, and it will just give you that whisper of a color that was on that piece of paper. And that paper did come from last week's painted paper session where I used a lot of water with the acrylic paints to make really translucent colored papers. It's exciting when it all comes together. Now, this piece of paper here, this is medical exam paper, and I did not create this paper last week, but I love the the flickers of color that are all over this paper, and I like the size of the shapes, and the color actually is working with this theme that I have going here. So that purplish color that you see on that transparent piece of paper that I just put in that second grid is also carried over by the 3 dots that I had put down in the first grid. So now we've got the teal carrying over, we've got the purple carrying over. We even have that piece of paper from last week that's carrying over between those 2 grids, and yet the grids look completely different. And I love that. That's part of the exercise for me, just seeing all the different ways that I can use similar things in new ways. Now, this here is a piece of roll-off paper. I mean, actual just rolling off my brayer on this piece of paper. And one of the things that I love about the roll-off paper, especially when using a brayer, is when I clean the edges of the brayer, it creates these really straight and colorful lines. And that's what that piece of paper is. So I'm thinking I want to use this piece of paper as a background for this particular grid square. I like the symmetry of those lines. The color of those lines happen to work with the other colors going on with the page. Now this is an opaque piece of paper. It's actually a piece of newsprint that was painted on. And so this bottom layer of this particular square in the grid is completely opaque. So all the translucency and transparency is going to be built on top of it. And I'm not sure how that's going to go yet, but what we'll be able to see down to are those very symmetrical lines. And I'm liking that, given that all the other grid boxes so far are more free flowing. This piece of paper that I am playing with right here, a lot of times I like to paint both sides of paper using the same colors on each side, but using them completely differently. And that's what I have here. And I haven't yet decided which side of this paper that is actually going to face up. I off camera, I spent a bit of time, deciding back and forth. And finally I said, I'm just going to put whatever thing down. And that's what you're seeing here, the result of that. And I think it was the right choice because it's starting to bring together the other three squares. Like, this is the moment when I'm starting to realize there's some type of story happening between these grids. And I don't know what that story is yet. Has something to do with my grandmother and it has something to do with these colors, but I'm not quite certain yet. But I love the symmetry of those straight lines so much that I'm going to fill another grid with the roll-off paper, but this time I'm going with that blue. So that blue, although not exactly the teal that we have above, that sense of blue is being brought in to this bottom square right now. And I may have to work a little to get all of these to be on the same page in terms of story. But for right now, these are just base layers and I'm happy with it. Now you're saying what happened to all the transparency, right? Well, it's coming in now. My process for creating any type of collage is do what feels good, move on to the next thing, come back when it feels good again, and just keep going back and forth until you're satisfied. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I still have that one empty square down there. That piece of paper that I just laid down that was medical exam paper with lots of beaded up black acrylic paint on it, and it just like many, many fine dots that you see there. That's completely transparent, and I just put it down on this second piece. Just a little hint of it, so it carries through to the two grid squares, because I like that. I like having some carryover, something that connects them all. And again, going with a completely opaque background for this last grid square and using that as the starting point for whatever this piece of the grid is going to be. This does seem a little off color for the rest of the colors in the rest of the grids, but not so totally off color that it's not usable. I may have to make some adjustment to that, and that adjustment may come from using some of these transparent and translucent papers. We'll see. So today, I am really drawn to these watermarked speckly papers to use as transparency. And this here is actually made from coffee in a spray bottle. It wasn't a continuous spray bottle that I used, like that water bottle there. It was actually a squirt bottle, like you would use on your plants. But I put some coffee in it and I squirted some paper, and that's what you were seeing there. That's what I'm laying down right now. And this will go completely transparent except for the coffee staining on it. Now, one tip, if you're going to use coffee stained paper, especially for transparency, because again, what we know about transparency is you have to work very, very wet. Um, the coffee itself is not stable. So you just need to be careful when you put it down and how much you manipulate it and touch it, because it will move around. And I don't think you can see it now, but there was a little bit of coffee staining outside of the grid that I needed to wipe off. So just be aware. Once the medium dries on it, it will be completely stable. But while it's wet, it's not that stable. So this here is, I don't know if you guys remember this. This video was so long ago. I want to say it was in, I don't know, the fall of 2023, where I had the fish stamp and I was using metallics and also gold leaf. And I created these fish. I kept them. I knew I was going to use them someday. And so I used it here in this grid collage. And I do have to be honest, with the black speckled transparent paper above the fish's head, that feels like a school of fish to me, and the story of this grid is really coming together for me. Um, my grandmother lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts. She was Portuguese, and many of the people that used to live in Gloucester were Portuguese fishermen that came over on boats from the Azores. Uh, Fishing heritage is part of my family heritage, but also fishing is a passion of mine. And she worked for Gorton's of Gloucester, the fish stick people, and she worked in the processing plant there. And I have a lot of family pride around um, around my heritage and fishing in particular. And so having her handwriting, having her recipe in this grid collage, and seeing what's developing is this whole fish theme. This is just very familial to me and meaningful. And I like that. And so relatable stories like that don't always come up when I create collage or grid collage, but this one is very relatable for me, and still trying to keep it abstracted, but I know the messaging here for me, and I like it. So I'm just adding just like little tiny bits of translucent and transparent papers, uh, just and it's what's really interesting about working with transparency is you need very little to make a huge impact. So as I'm laying down these little tiny pieces of blue, right? Just a tiny piece of paper. It's the size of my pinky finger, the tip of my pinky finger. But it made a big impact in that one grid square. And that's one of the things I find so satisfying about working with grids completely. Speaking of which, I have something really fun to share. Earlier today, I had the most amazing conversation with an artist that you probably know well. Her name is Jackie Schomburg, and we had an absolutely outrageously fun and delightful conversation. It was the first time we ever spoke. It was just a Zoom call, and we were twinning in the most interesting of ways. But Jackie also does quite a bit of grid work, and so it's just I wanted to bring it up because it was just really fun. I admire her work so much. And as we were talking, we were coming up with something really fun that we're not really ready to talk about yet, but we're going to be doing something in the near future that we think you're going to get a kick out of. So I did want to tell you about that. And you can find her work right here on YouTube and in other places, but be sure to check her out and subscribe to her channel if you haven't. She's an absolute delight. All right, so I decided how I was going to tone down that one square where the colors were just a little off for what was going on. So this piece of paper that I'm cutting up right now, this is a piece of medical exam paper that I painted last week with the light phthalo blue, some of the metallic gold. Uh, I can't remember what the metallic gold was, but if you watch last week's video, you'll see what it was. And a lot of water. And it made a barely there shimmer of blue and gold. And as I lay this down with the gloss medium and the water and more gloss medium, this is going to completely change what you're about to see. And it just brought all of these squares together. Look at that. You see, this square belongs now. And that belonging happened not by painting it, by laying down a piece of translucent paper over the existing paper, and it changed the whole feel. So I want you to be thinking about this, whether you're doing grid collage or big paintings or whatever you're doing. You have the power to paint papers that can go translucent or transparent, and that can completely change the mood or the aspect of what you're creating. And I absolutely love that. That's magic to me. Absolute magic. And this is just a process of building up more. This black speckled paper, I seem to be very in love with this week. It's just making the rounds between all 6 of the grids, uh, and well, almost all of the grids, and I like it. I just think it's adding texture, it's adding perspective, it's adding a point of reference and connectivity between all the pieces. Really fun. If you haven't signed up for one of my free resources, yet, I would totally recommend it today, especially. When you sign up for one of my free resources, you get all of my free resources. So I have a link to that down in the description, including this template that you're seeing me use here for the grid. I have that as a free resource inside my Creative Collective community. It's a free membership in the community, and it'll give you access to all of my free resources, including my free gel plate video course. And I think you'll love all the things in there. So I just used the grid template to go ahead and frame out the squares that I already have. Now, this is not perfect framing, and I am totally 100% okay with that. This is a work in my sketchbook. I'm doing this today primarily for the enjoyment of it, right? But also because you all always do ask what I do with these papers. And even though I'm using the painted papers all the time, like in every single episode, I'm using the painted papers in some way. I wanted to be able to show you specific ways that I use them. And so this is certainly one of them. Now, this piece of paper here is, I've had this painted piece of sheet music for, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. And somehow it's finding its way into this grid collage. And it's funny to me, actually, how a piece of paper that I created years ago that's actually roll-off paper. I don't know if you can tell that or not, but it's roll-off paper that I just did on a piece of sheet music. I never knew what I would use it for or when I would use it. I just had it in my stash. And when I was pulling papers for today, I wanted to pull papers that had some sense of last week's transparency work, but also that might fit in. And I'm so happy I grabbed the sheet. The sheet is years old and it's finding its way into today's art. Love that. Now, this stage of my process, I'm being far more intentional about how I am connecting each square in the grid. And although there are no twins in this grid collage at all, there are sisters who are very closely aligned, right? So, what I'm doing now is I'm going in and trying to find that definition, trying to find the thing that is going to make each square a unique piece on its own. Yet, if this were a grouping or if this was very large on a wall, we would know that they all belong together. So I'm using some of these neo colors and I am highlighting, I'm shading a little bit, I'm adding a little bit of punch. I mean, we really haven't used orange in this grid collage, and yet every fiber in my body was saying to add some orange here. Not necessarily in this specific location, but within this grid study. And so I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to pop it in a couple places because it feels like it belongs. And if there's any messaging that I've been trying to get across from day one here on YouTube, is that trust your intuition creatively. And if your body is really telling you to do something, just do it. I mean, the worst case scenario is you quote unquote ruin the piece you're working on. Doesn't matter, not even a little bit. You just start over, or you paint over it, or you collage over it. There's nothing that's permanent. And I hope that knowing that gives you permission to explore and try things that you wouldn't necessarily try. Like, I was perfectly happy with these grids the way they were going, and then all of a sudden I'm throwing orange in. It's a whole new aspect to all of this. And yet, I love what I am seeing here. There's something the pop of it against all these other colors that are fairly mid-tone. Um, I think it's adding some excitement. At least it is for me. I hope it is for you. It's just little tiny specks of it. It doesn't even need to be a lot, but it's now unifying all 6 squares, and even these lines that were created by the edge of the brayer, um, just a little touch of color, that little touch of orange brings the lines out a little bit more and just adds to it all, adds to the directionality or the visual interest even of each square. And just creating a little more oomph to the fish itself. In retrospect, I actually cut the fish wrong, or did I cut it wrong? No, I would have cut it differently if I could do it over again and made it proportionally more correct than it is, but I'm okay with it. It's just a story. It's a fish hanging out, right? Like, it's no big deal. It's just these are things that I notice, and that's something that I'll write in my studio journal so that in the future, I'll make a different choice, or a choice that I'll be happier with. Not beating myself up for it, I'm just saying these are the things, this is how you learn and this is how you grow. Mm. Uh, I think what I am noticing at this point, now that we've dropped in some of this orange and some more of this teal, what's missing is that pink area that I'm working on right now, right? So it's pink, and I know it's pink. You could say it's a super light purple. It's one of the transparent papers that I created last week. But that pink is not being carried through anywhere else at this point, and I wanna change that. Not that I want a big pink presence, that sounded funny, but I do want some of that pink to come through in the squares. And I don't know if I need to approach this via collage by adding some of these transparent elements or or if I should paint it in. And so what you're seeing now is me go through the process of trying to figure that out. So I pulled some of the pink papers. None of them seem quite right, to be honest. And so I grabbed some Titan Buff, and I'm going to test out pinks in a second. But what I noticed about this field of speckled black that I'm calling a school of fish, uh, the fact that it was touching the main fish was problematic for me. It just seemed too crowded. So I wanted to create some air. So I used some of the Titan Buff fluid acrylic to edit out some of the black speckles so that it wasn't so connected to the fish. And in doing that, I figured out the way to bring in the pink uh, in a way that I could control. So the collage pink, the collage papers that were pink were just too intense for what I was trying to accomplish here. So I took some primary magenta, I mixed it with that Titan Buff, and I am essentially just dry brushing it into these grid squares. And I think that the emotional lift that the shade of pink is bringing into the grids is profound. Uh, it's it's adding an element to the story that's going on between all of these grid pieces that feels personal, and it feels I don't know what I'm saying here, guys, but it feels humanistic or something. The pink is bringing a heartbeat into each grid square, and, some of you have heard this story before about my grandmother, but whenever I used to go and visit her in Gloucester, every night she'd make me, strawberries in milk. She'd cut up the strawberries and pour milk and then sprinkle some sugar on it, and she said it was so I would wake up with rosy cheeks. It's the sweetest thing ever. And maybe I'm adding the pink in here subconsciously because of the rosy cheek factor. I don't know, but I like it an awful lot. And, as I'm finishing up this grid collage, I'm very happy with what happened here. But if you really look at it closely, and I'm about to zoom in on it for you, you can see that the translucent and transparent papers were what really brought this entire grid collage together. And that's powerful. Knowing how to do that, having that translucent and transparent paper skill set in your bag of creative tricks can make a huge, huge difference in in the potential for what you make. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate you being part of this community. I would love for you to join my mailing list so you can get notified about the most exciting event that I have coming up, which is the Mastering Mixed Media Expo, a completely free event for you to participate in. And you can sign up for that using the link in my description. I want you to have a fantastic week. I want you to explore and experiment. And if translucency and transparency is in your wheelhouse, play with it.